Hello and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, hi, I'm Cassidy. If it's not, thanks for always tuning into my videos. Today we are doing a first impressions, first predictions video. So what this is going to be is I'm going to read the first chapter of a bunch of books and come here and tell you my first impressions and what I predict the star rating for to be of the book. The spin on this one, the twist is I will only be doing it with Orbit books today. So Orbit is one of my personal favorite publishers. I end up getting a lot of their books. I love a lot of their books, and I thought, why not start this little thing off with Orbit, because most of my highly anticipated reads are Orbit. So that's all. There's not really any other rhyme or reason. We're just gonna pick books that grab my attention today and read them. So let's get right on into it. So the first book I picked up to read the first chapter of is Ash of the Sun by Daniel Wexler. This is the Burning Blade and Silver Eye. The synopsis is about two siblings, one who works for the Empire and wields magic for them, and the other one who wants to tear the Empire apart, and nothing will stop them from splitting the world in two, and that synopsis sounded great. So, of course, this is like the first one I picked up and was like, let's read it. I read the first chapter. It is technically a prologue. It's 7 pages long. I adored it. 9 pages long, sorry. I adored this prologue. Honestly, I almost kept reading. It was so good. It was like a setup of the two characters we're going to see. We're starting in the past. I think if you look at the first chapter, it then says like 12 years later. So it is them as childhood. So we have our two main characters and we watch the first incident, the vital incident that turns them into who they are. And it's done so well. You get to see a little glimpse of the magic system. You also get to see their personalities very vividly at this time. And I'm excited to see how this initial incident will change them in this 12 years later, because I think we're going to get a big jump, but you're going to understand why. But the setup of the world and the magic in this first chapter was so good. I just really felt like in depth reading it. I felt like I can already tell where this story is gonna go, and it's gonna go on a journey that I am not ready yet so ready for. So I'm definitely putting this one as a 5-star prediction. I'm hoping this vlog isn't just all 5-star predictions, but like I have big hopes. The writing in this just really worked for me. Django Wexler balances description and fact really well. Like, I'm getting enough abrupt storytelling, but also getting just enough description of things so that I can vividly imagine the world without being, like, drowned in description. And I really enjoyed that. It felt very, like, simple, I want to say, yet complicated. Like, it just is a really good balance between both of those things. Like, very easily in the first, like, 4 pages of the prologue, we're setting up characters and really starting to hone in on the love of the characters. Like, I already am invested in these characters. And then the last, like, 5 or so pages are, like, world building and magic setup and initial incident. And yeah, I enjoyed this one. So 5-star prediction right here. Let's get on into the next one. Okay, for the second book, I picked up the Arranger of Marzana by John Scovrin. 2 siblings, 2 nations, 1 war for it all. So I thought this was kind of interesting to pick up after that one because they have similar premises with one sibling fighting against the Empire and one sibling fighting for the Empire. And obviously I like the trope. This one is only 6 pages long. It does have like a part 1 with a quote at the beginning, which is typical fantasy, but something I really enjoy in my fantasies. I'm unsure about this one, whereas when I read the Ashes of the Sun prologue, I felt very immersed and in the story. Like, I felt like I was our character. This one, I felt like I was listening to a story being told. So they're just very different types of storytelling takes. I think I prefer a story where I feel in it and immersed in the world, the characters, the culture, the plot, all of that, versus storytelling, which is how I feel kind of about more atmospheric reads. They tend to be a little bit more storyteller. Things like The Bear and the Nightingale, The Wolf and the Woodsman, I can't think of another, but that kind of vibe. I think I would put this at maybe a 3.5-star prediction right now. We follow in the first chapter this like little boy who is witnessing the Arranger of Marzana. So I don't really know where the book is going from here because I don't know if we'll be getting his POV the whole time, or if it was just like a one-time off, which if it was a one-time off, I kind of wished it had been a prologue instead of chapter 1. Because our main character's name is Sonia, but we do not know her brother's name, but obviously we've already seen Sonia and she's a lot older, and I was not picturing her brother to be very young. The first chapter does kind of have Robin Hood style vibes to it, so I do enjoy that, except for that the very last line of the first chapter really did hook me. Writers with first great lines and first last lines are my favorites. They always hook me to continue reading, and I will say I'm not as interested in continuing reading from the whole chapter, but that very last line I was like, I need to know where this book goes from there. So I think I'm putting this one at a 3.5 prediction. It's definitely a little bit more atmospheric of a read than some of the other books I read, but polar fantasies actually tend to be more atmospheric because they tend to pull from like Russian Slavic folklore, which is a little bit more atmospheric, I find, just in general. So we're going to see how I like this one. I'm still really excited about this one, but it's definitely not a 5-star. You'll see this back to back, but I actually took a pause. I forgot to say that this one definitely sets up more like politics. We didn't see any of the actual magic in the first chapter. I'm not sure what the magic even is in this storyline, but we are setting up the politics of the Empire versus the Ranger and this like Robin Hood type character. Okay, next I did Engines of Empire by R.S. Ford. You know what sucks is reading a book and not overly enjoying the first chapter, but feeling like the book has potential. Based on the first chapter alone, my first impression is a 2-star. It is a prologue and it's only 8 pages long. I just found the writing very dry and hard to read. Like, it definitely found myself having to reread lines and paragraphs again because I wasn't understanding the words on the page. So that was just not a friend. And at first I was sitting at a 3-star, but the book in this prologue does something that really annoys me. I don't know if I would count as a spoiler. It's in the first 8 pages, but if you do, skip ahead to this time. In the first 8 pages, we watch a girl kill a bunch of characters, and then for some reason, there's no reason told, save our main character's life. Like, just doesn't kill him, just tells him to run. And there was just no motivation for that, and didn't like that. It's very military, point blank, but the whole idea, a sweeping tale of clashing guilds, magic fueled machines, and revolution. So I'm excited to try it because I don't read a lot of like more steampunky fantasy, and I do want to dive into it. So I'm still really excited to try this book, but needless to say, it's not my favorite opening chapter because I think it's going to be a bit of a 2-star, maybe just a low 3-star prediction overall. And then we did The Bladed Faith by David Douglas. I got this sent by Orbit. Thank you, Orbit. This is one of my most anticipated releases of the year, so I'm very excited to have read the first chapter. I'm gonna put this at a 4-star prediction. I enjoyed the first chapter, but it was a lot. In some ways, it reminds me of a story that we kind of set up in Legacy of Ash, just my first thoughts on it. The prologues or first chapters I found quite similar, and I gave Legacy of Ash 4 stars and really enjoyed it. The tagline on it is every shadow hides a truth, every hero hides a lie. We're following Cyrus, who at 14 sees his country's invaded, his god slain, and his parents murdered. So the first chapter is literally seeing that happen. And then he becomes a political prisoner, and he ends up just waiting to have a chance of revenge and be free. So I'm expecting a revenge story. I'm expecting to really enjoy this one. 4 stars for me is a high praise. 4-star prediction for sure, based off that first chapter. I just found it just a little bit too dense for my liking. I wasn't as invested. Again, this is a story we're watching through our main character's eyes, what's happening to his country and his parents, but he's not like a part of the battle. So I just kind of felt like taken aback by that, so I just couldn't get as invested into it. But obviously as the chapters go on, we will be more with our character instead of just like watching important life-altering things happen. So I think that there's still a great potential for this book, and I'm very excited to try it. I do know it's also multi-POV'd, which I was not expecting, but the second chapter, if I'm flipping through here, there's a couple other chapter names in there. I also really, really like this map. And next, I read the first chapter of Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. I am going to, I think, give this a 4-star prediction. maybe a 4.5 actually. I am very interested in this one, and the first chapter piqued my interest even more. We're following like a story that I feel like is very unique, but still following a classic fantasy idea, which I really like. This one is about a band of mercenaries who are long past their glory days. They're old, they're retired, they've lived lives past their golden age of mercenariness, and something puts them on the trail to be mercenaries again, or it's time to get the band back together. So I was expecting comedy in this, and you can tell in this first chapter there is just like this twang to it. I find the comedy is not as like abrupt and as crude as some of the other comedy I've read in fantasy, which I enjoy. I like that it's kind of more subtle almost, and just like snarky. They're in the first 2 pages, they're talking about going to get a drink, and the main character keeps saying no. He finally says, yes, I'll get one, because it was hard work looking north all day, after all, because he does nothing all day. And that kind of humor really got me. This first chapter, which is 6 pages long, kind of did set up the personality of our main character and also the history of our main character. You're definitely getting to know how he feels about his golden days and how he's kind of like over it but also wants to be there again. And then our last line of this first chapter made me want to continue on. I was very intrigued about where this is going. It ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. 6 pages in, I already want to keep reading, so I'm gonna put this at 4.5 prediction. I don't really give like half markers typically, but you'll hear me say a low, a solid, or a high. Put this at a high 4. So I'm intrigued by this one. I think that it's just going to be a unique take, and if it's done right, it'll be done right. And by that first chapter, I think it'll be done right. That made no sense. Drink every time I say done right. On to the next one. And I read the first chapter of the Pariah. This was the longest chapter that we read. It was, well, that I've read so far. It is 17 pages long. I really enjoyed this one. This is a very different tone than the other ones I've read. I feel like this has a bit more of a grim, dark tone to it. I don't think it's grim dark though, but I do think it has a little bit of that grittier, darker tone. I think I'm gonna put this at a 5-star prediction. Something about it reminds me of Prince of Thorns meets Traitor's Blade. In this first chapter, we learn about a kind of group of thugs, a band of thieves and mercenaries who have one leader who is like this legendary outlaw. And our protagonist is telling us about these exaggerated stories, and he is at the same moment also in a battle/thieving moment where the outlaws are coming to take what they want from these soldiers. It was very interesting the way it was told. This book is told in first person, which is a bit of a rarity I find in adult high fantasy, and I'm very excited for it. I think it's going to add something to this story, and I kind of like the idea of it being his own experiences. I believe we're only following one POV, but I could be wrong. But it being first person makes me feel like I'm following only one POV. I'm very excited to see where this story goes. I know it's a story of revenge. You can kind of feel those impacts of a character who is heroic and gray all at once. So I'm excited for this one. I think that if you like a vengeance story, this could be it for you, but there's a little bit of comedy in this as well. I think we're gonna get some really great side characters in this, and yeah, I'm excited to read this one. And then I did Age of Assassins by R.J. Barker. This one's kind of hard because I actually have read, this is the only author in this pile that I have read from before. So I was trying not to cloud my judgment with my thoughts on the author as a whole. I think from the first chapter I would put as a 2-star prediction without the author influence. With author influence, I should get rid of this book before even reading it. I'm honestly not entirely sure what just went down. It's a prologue and it's 5 chapters long. It started really good for me. The first 1.5 to 2 pages, I was like, okay, yes, I'm feeling this. We're killing someone. We're an assassin story. Let's go. And then there's like some kind of possession thing, I think, but I was so confused. R.J. Barker's writing style is just not the best for my brain and my enjoyment of reading. He's very wordy. He's a little more atmospheric than I like for a typical fantasy story. I'm a little more blunt with my writing. I want it just to be abrupt to the point. He definitely throws in random words for description for no reason and is wordy and lengthy And these are all things I had problems with in The Tide Child, and I'm seeing them all again. Even though people say they're two very different types of books, I don't think R.J. Barker is an author for me, and I think this chapter test definitely proved it. Without the Tide Child trilogy, I'm saying this is a 2-star prediction. With my knowledge of the Tide Child trilogy, it's gonna be a 1-star. We'll see, I guess, when I read it. Okay, and then we did the Wolf of Orion Yarrow by K.S. Veloso. I'm giving this a 4-star prediction. There were some things that really intrigued me in this. The first chapter is 15 pages long. We are just starting to get our... it's kind of a look back on the initial incident that propels the story along and propels the plot on the synopsis of the back of the book, which is that her husband goes missing and her husband leaves, and then 5 years later there's a message from him saying, let's meet for like an alliance thing. I think I really enjoy this one because there is a conversation in here that's happening about women and about society standards for women, and for women who don't want to be those smile at everything you say, laugh, pretty, not super smart women, right? Like, that's what society asks of us, and when you're not that way, there becomes a problem with you, and society can accept it, and I think we're going to see that conversation come up a lot in this book, which is what puts it at a high-star rating for me, is I love books that kind of do that, and books that mirror the real-world issues. The thing that I think stopped it from getting that 5-star prediction is I'm still a little confused on the politics and the royal line, how that works, and how society classes work in this. And that's not a big problem. It's only the first chapter, but I'm predicting my ratings off of the first chapter, right? So I think that we will get that cleared up as we go on. Like, they did try to set up a lot within 15 pages, and it didn't work completely. I'm intrigued enough at how those classes work and that ranking works, but I didn't entirely understand it exactly. But as I said, first chapter. I think that this one could be interesting. It's another book that is told in first person, so I think we are only getting the one POV. I left as I read this and it was also first person. I was like, it's not that a lot of fantasy books aren't first person, it's that I mostly read multi-POV'd fantasy books now. And those are not first person most of the time for a reason. So I'm reading single POV'd fantasies over here, and they are first person. I'm just not used to it anymore. My love of books tends to be towards a multi-POV'd expansive fantasy, but I'm very excited to try this and see where it goes. I like the discussion. I think we're going to see different cultures in this a little bit as well, because there's a bit of an alliance happening and all this other stuff, and I think this one could be good. And there we have it. I've read 7 different Orbit books, first chapters, and predicted what I think I will give them and the first impressions I have of them in this video. I'm hoping that at some point in the future I'll have read all of these and I'll be able to look back on this video and tell you if my first impressions were correct and if I was correct with the ratings. You can hopefully look out for that video at some point in the future, but who knows when that'll be, because that requires me to read 7 books. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. I could definitely do it again. I have more Orbit books that I didn't include in this, but I also could do other publishers. Another one of my favorites is Tor. There's also self-pub books that I love, and you know, it's just an interesting little thing I think to see. So yeah, just let me know if you enjoyed it. If you made it all the way to the end of this video and you'd like to leave me an emoji just to say you were here, leave me a moon emoji. And if you'd like to connect with me on other platforms, my Bookstagram, my Book Twitter, my Goodreads, and my Patreon are all linked in the description bar below. Have yourselves an absolutely remarkable day.